To talk about this more is Donnachadh McCarthy, who's Director of Climate Media Coalition. Hi, Donnachadh. Do the results of that poll, the results of that poll pretty much ring true to me. It does seem to be divided on party lines and very much sort of split down the middle of people in the United Kingdom, those who are sort of warmer to the idea of taking pretty strong action against climate change and those who are sort of less keen.
Well, this is a rather strange poll because it doesn't really ask people whether they actually support climate action or not. The polls that actually ask the public whether they support climate action show very large majorities of the public, including large majorities of Tory voters, want action on climate. What I thought was quite interesting, Alex, in the actual details of what Rishi Sunak announced, actually a lot of it is the opposite of what is claimed. It's actually adding costs to consumers. So take, for example, the decision to not require landlords to insulate tenants' homes. Nearly 3 million people live in cold homes in the UK in private flats with very high bills. This will add around £8 billion, is estimated, to their consumer bills over the next 10 years. That's on top of the already £10 billion added to consumers' costs with the elimination of previous insulation programmes. And finally, the issue around electric cars. 80% of people in Britain don't buy new cars. Poor people don't buy new cars. And the RAC has said that the running cost of electric vehicles lifetime is around £5,000 to £8,000 less than a fossil fuel vehicle. So what he's done, he's actually delayed the market for second-hand vehicles being available to poorer people. So I would argue measure after measure of what he announced will add costs to consumers and delay action on climate. So a double whammy.
They're very interesting points, and I actually agree with you on the most of that, to be honest. What happened to Insulate Britain? I actually didn't. Out of all the activists out there, and you probably know my politics, I'm not very keen on some of these, people gluing themselves to tarmac. But Insulate Britain, I thought, had a really good point. We all want warmer homes. We're having an energy crisis. I'm a renter. I wouldn't mind my cottage being insulated. It gets a bit chilly in winter. What should we be doing? Because I'm very sympathetic to the view that the problem we have here is if you sort of put in place very onerous targets without really thinking through how you're going to deliver them, you're essentially saying to the taxpayer, you're going to have to carry the can for this. You're going to have to somehow afford a heat pump. You're going to have to somehow, save up and afford an electric vehicle or so on and so forth. And all the while, I'm not sure how much the needle when it comes to global carbon emissions is going to be moved if we don't apply some sort of restrictions to China and the amount of stuff we import from there, because as far as I can tell, what we risk doing potentially is not only exporting our carbon footprint to China, which is by and large what we're doing, but exporting our prosperity and our industry there as well. Should we be taking a more global view, albeit that China are not about to sign up to any sort of international accords one doesn't think? Do we need to be looking beyond this country and seeing how we can address things like, I think 46% of our carbon emissions, so to speak, are being made abroad?
Wow, Alex, you've given me around 10 questions there.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on a roll. Lots of hot air.
No, not hot air, but some interesting points. On your very first question, what happened to Insulate Britain? Well, actually, I do know some of them. And sadly, from my point of view, they're in jail. Some of them are in jail for around 3 years for the protests that they carried out for what I believe is a very valid cause. Insulating the home so poor people aren't dying and poor people have lower bills. As regards to your point about international global, we have to take action in the UK and we have to take action globally and we have to have action in China and India. Yes to all of those. However, Margaret Thatcher would never have gone to the UN and said, we want India and China to act before Britain acts. She would have said Britain must act and show the others how they can do it. Now, the issue around China is interesting because China's per capita emissions obviously are lower than the UK's, but they have over 1 billion people. So obviously their collective carbon footprint is higher. And they have 50% of the world's onshore wind and 50% of the world's solar installed. Britain this year is installing 0 onshore wind because the UK Tory government banned the cheapest form of renewable energy available.
I mean, I've always been a huge advocate for nuclear, quite frankly, and we do know, sort of going off down another tangent, there have been various reports which have shown that Russian operatives actually infiltrated some of the green movements and made sure that nuclear was added to the same list as fossil fuels. And well, you can see their motivation for doing that, really, because if Europe really managed to get a hold of some good nuclear power, then actually it means that we don't have to buy gas from them, and we wouldn't have this climate crisis that we're in. I mean, do you agree with me on that one, Donnachadh? Do you think we should be looking into technology such as nuclear, and especially things like these small modular reactors that Rolls-Royce say that they can pop up quite quickly?
Well, I think if taking your political position is that you want to reduce costs for consumers and you want to increase domestic energy security. If you look at the cost per megawatt hour from the existing nuclear fleet, it's around £120 for the new Hinkley Point nuclear reactor. The market cost for renewables at the moment is between 45 and 55 per megawatt hour. So on cost grounds, it doesn't make sense. And even a nuclear enthusiast like Sir David King, who was the last government chief scientist, who is a nuclear advocate, he says if we build a new nuclear on Sizewell C, we will not be able to prevent it from being flooded by the rising sea levels that are now occurring and are unstoppable and as predicted. And the other point was about nuclear in Norfolk and Suffolk is the planning authority said we don't have enough water to actually fresh water to supply such a nuclear plant. But the government overrode it. So on many fronts, there are practical reasons why it doesn't work. But most importantly, economically, they don't work. And on regard the modular ones, China has tried modular and America has tried modular, and they haven't got them working yet.
I mean, someone talked, messaged into one of my shows the other day, and I thought made a really interesting point. Given that Britain has to build a whole load of new houses, quite frankly, I mean, I think we have to build at the rate of around 250,000 houses every year just to catch up with a backlog, and that would take us about 20 years. Should we be looking, instead of punishing everyday people, saying to developers especially, and some of these huge house building companies, when you're building new housing estates, make sure these new buildings have solar panels and windfarms?
Well, I live in an 1840s house, cottage, terrace house in the centre of London, and my energy bills are zero. I have solar, I have high insulation, and I have a battery. And I want that for everybody in Britain, especially for poorer people. And the first target for zero carbon homes was introduced in 2008 for delivery in 2018, and the government tore it up and threw it out. One thing that really frustrates me at the moment, and I think you might agree with me, is I'm seeing new housing estates going up around where I live in Southwark, and the roofs are facing northwards. So they will never be able to have solar even retrofitted in them. Now, that's a total scandal.
Very interesting. Donnachadh, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's always good to discuss these things. Yeah, I mean, I personally think that the owners should be on people like big businesses to deal with this and not on individuals. I don't think it's right at all to ask Mrs. Miggins in Wiltshire to pay 25 grand or whatever it is to put a heat pump in her back garden. You know, that is just not on. But when you've got big businesses and the house builders and all the rest of it, they can take it, right? They can take the pressure. They can live according to whatever government legislation is printed on this